Great. We are live on YouTube. My first my first YouTube live stream. Thanks, Brad, for joining me today.
Yeah, love it. Been looking forward to this conversation for a while. It's
Yeah,
here.
it's here. So I thought we'd just give ourselves just a quick intro. I'll start and then you can go next.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, great. So for anyone who's listening or watching the recorded version, I'm Andrea Baillo. I'm a scientist, executive coach, and founder of Rooted for Success. At Rooted for Success, our coaching practice lies in the belief that leadership is both a natural endowment and a cultivated skill, and shaped very deeply by personal experience and the influence of others. So I embrace, as a coach, the opportunity to be a challenger and a guide when working with my clients to inspire growth and self-awareness.
Oh, I love that. Inspire growth. Yeah, that's awesome. So for those of you out there, I'm Brad Spears, and I'm an executive and leadership coach. And I spent 30 years in the world's greatest Air Force, and now I'm helping small business and found leaders and founders get unstuck or move towards their goals. And a lot of time that revolves around scaling or going to the next level. And so I just enjoy pouring in and helping leaders, and I especially enjoy having conversations with Andrea. So I'm super excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Brad, you have such an interesting background. We talk about this all the time. And you and I do have the fortune, what do we meet? Once a month about?
Yeah, once a month.
Yeah. And so we just continue to have conversations. We met in September of 24 in our coaching program. We're part of the Center for Executive Coaching. And ever since then, yeah, we just kept connecting. And you and I always end up in really inspiring conversations. And so the last time we met, I was like, we should stop, right? And we should be recording this. So I thought we would play around in the YouTube live area and see how it would look to have a conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited because, one of the things that I really appreciate about our conversations is how you are just so authentic and real when we're talking, and you just have this incredible library of things that you can draw from, and your ability to distill information. And so, yeah, I enjoy the heck out of our conversations every month, and I'm looking forward to this one. And so, remembering back, I was thinking about one of my friends, my good friends, who's a CEO. He said to me, recently, where focus goes, you know, energy grows.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how energy, flows to those areas where we get, super focused. And I want to bring that to you and see what you think about that saying.
Mhm. Right. And I feel like it's the first time I'm hearing it again, where focus goes, energy
Hmm.
grows, right? Is
Yeah,
what you just said?
yeah. Either energy grows or energy flows. Yeah.
Energy flows. Yeah. And so, when I think about that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, because if we're focused, then we're able to put the energy into what we want to do. And then at the same time, the more, when we can give that energy to our focus. It's almost like a loop.
Mm, yeah. Okay. What do you think? What do you think about this idea of focus?
I mean, focus is, I think when we've talked about this in the past, it's that focus is really able to come once we have clarity, right? And we have understanding of our purpose. And so it kind of comes back to that mission, vision, values. Like when we know who we are, what we're trying to do, and we have clarity around that. And like even like our priorities, like, can you prioritize? And when I think about that, like that's where I think focus actually comes from. It comes from having the awareness and the clarity to be able to create the focus, right? To have the ability to focus on a
Mhm.
specific topic or a specific need or whatever it is that we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that kind of awareness is so key. So a lot of times in my coaching, I'm going back to I call it the basics, the foundations, right? Strengths, values, purpose, and helping my clients, connect to that. I'm wondering what do you have in your toolkit where you start thinking about that to create that, help your clients create that clarity.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, like my niche is that I free business leaders from constant reactivity, right? Giving them time back in teams that excel. And we do this through leadership habits and through creating clarity and awareness. Again, I know I'm bringing up those words a lot, but what was your question again?
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you're working with
What tools I
clients
use?
that may be wanting
Yeah,
some help in that area of clarity or awareness.
right, right. And so, when it comes down to that, I do, like, I think we talked about this too, is like the priority matrix, right? So being able
Mm,
to know when you're to focus on something is knowing what you should be focusing on. And so, I use these decision filters like,
mm,
does this move me toward my top three priorities? Like, is this part of my top three priorities? And does it help move me forward? And if it doesn't, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, or you should be delaying doing it, or you should be asking someone else to help you with it. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think creating clarity is a matter of having the awareness, right? Again, of what it is that you're actually trying to do. And if you're able to, then you can go ahead and move forward and be able to, like, even set those priorities. So it's kind of the cart before the horse, right? You have to sit down and really understand what it is that you want. What are your top three things that are most important to you right now? Right. And I think obviously I'm doing business and leadership coaching, but when it comes down to just a friend or a family member, for example, I had someone, saying, oh, should I, renew my rent? Like, should I renew my apartment? And I'm like, well, does it align with your top three priorities?
mm.
What are you actually trying to do? And they were like, I've never actually sat down and thought, what are my top, like, three priorities for life? Like, what am I really trying to do right now? And
Yeah,
so that clarity, asking people those questions, probing that, or having the ability to do that yourself, right? I think is what will really supply a lot, or allow people to have some focus.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. And, one of the things that I think about with, my clients is once you've kind of gone through that process to think about what your values are, and kind of maybe turn that into a value statement or a purpose statement, is that you've got something that you can put up, in your workspace that can keep you focused on it because you're seeing it. So when you're coming in, to your workspace and you go, okay, what do I need to focus on, today? Well, you can ask yourself those questions relative to what you've thought about in the past with what your values are, and what your purpose is. And
Mhm.
I love that you said, I've got a decision filter in here, right? That helps me say yes or no to things that I could be using my time for.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And what did you just say? You just said something that triggered a thought, which was the value statement and the purpose statement. And so I think I told you one of the things, I just have been listening to a lot of Simon Sinek, who
Mm,
is a pretty well-known leadership coach, and he wrote a book called Starting with the Why, right? I think
yep.
it's something
Start
along
with
those
why.
lines.
Yeah,
Start
absolutely.
with why. And so
Powerful.
I ran through a practice of that, and then I actually created a tool and I shared it with a client recently, like very rough version of it. And I was like, there's a couple ways to go about this, right? And you can sit down and ask yourself some reflective questions to understand why you do what you do. Because according to Simon Sinek, we do the why. The why starts, like, I think it's framed between the ages of, like, he said, like, even like 14 to 30 or something, but like you pretty much don't change, right? I even had a conversation last night about this with someone. I was like, we don't change, because this girl was like, I've seen Andrew in 2 years just completely change. And I'm like, I've been the same person the whole time.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm 41 years old. Like, I am definitely not changing that much anymore. The core of who I am, right? And so the why, again, this is what it's going back to. The why doesn't change. I do these things that I've been doing my whole time. There's a reason why I went backpacking through South America. There's a reason why I lived in a camper on BLM land. And, have quit my job and restarted my career and reinvented my career 4 times, right? These are all, and so I think that actually provides a lot of clarity for people to be able to
Mhm.
focus. If you can even understand why you do what you do, I mean, imagine the focus you could have right there, right?
Mhm. No, I absolutely love it. And because we're keeping this conversation, real, I love Simon Sinek, and that book was foundational to kind of my launch into, an era of leadership development. But I read something recently and doing a little bit more work around values, um, and thinking about maybe it doesn't start with why. Maybe the why flows from the what, and the what are those core values that you have that, are immutable, right? And no matter what, you're falling back on those, values, maybe 3 to 5 values that underpin everything, including your why. What do you think about
Mhm.
that?
I feel like everything's a loop in the world because I'm almost like it's so tied together because
Mm,
it's like, well, what my values are going to say why I do, but why I do is what my values are,
mm. So
you
it's a
know?
reinforcing loop.
It's a reinforcing loop. Yeah. I
Yeah,
didn't think about like, yeah. And the how is what changes all the time, right? Because
yeah.
like how we do it now is why
Oh,
maybe someone that says she is so different than she was 2 years ago because how I've been expressing myself, how I've been communicating with people is very different than it was 2 years ago, like without a doubt, or 3 years ago.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, so I can get on board, with that. But I really like this idea of a reinforcing loop. It's not one or the other, and it's not linear in
Mhm.
nature, but it's it's cyclical, and they build on each other. And that's probably why I go back and work on values and purpose statements, right? So that you can articulate both. You can articulate what those core values are and why you're trying to show up in this world in a certain way and achieve certain things.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just thinking about a conversation I had last night because it was interesting too, where this person asked me like, "Oh, what are you dedicating yourself to?" Like that was like they never had met me, and they were just like, "Oh, what do you dedicate your life or yourself to?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "I'm going to use my why statement because I just made this the other day." It's like, oh, and so I did. Um, I don't know where was I going with this. So I did though, and I was like, "Why? What are we dedicating ourselves to?" Do people even know the answer themselves, I guess? So, like, this focus and energy, I'm gonna kinda bring it back to there, like, like you said, this is, like, so a reinforcing loop. Like, how do we this is what I think our job is as coaches and why people
Mhm.
do hire us and wanna work with us is to, like, get them there, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's nothing like stepping away from your normal day to day to do a little bit of contemplation, on super important things. And, I think coaching conversations allow our clients to do that, right? They're stepping out of their normal, day to day routines, and they've got some focused, there you go, focused time with with a coach to, to think about those things and just be reconnected with
Mhm,
those things. Maybe they have explored it in the past, but they've got disconnected, or maybe they haven't explored it in the past and they just need to be, connected for the first time.
mhm. Yeah. And sometimes I think too, like people lose focus when things right aren't clear. We've said like these words like a bunch of times now. We're pretty everyone's pretty aware
Mhm,
here of the clarity that's needed. And when those times are so uncertain, I think people fall back to like standard practices in their lives because
mhm,
uncertainty is our brains actually like fear it. They sense it as
yeah,
danger. Like they see uncertainty, the brain does, and it's like, oh, I need to go back to the way things were. How do we get
right,
back there? Instead, it's like uncertainty should be an opportunity, not a barrier, right? We
mhm,
should be like, we should all be. And this kind of goes back to I told you I lived in the camper on BLM, right?
yeah,
And like that was a choice. And it wasn't because I had to, it was because I wanted to. And I was putting myself in an uncomfortable situation to remember to practice adaptability. And I think we
Hmm.
talked about this too. Adaptability and resilience are the things that are going to allow you to get through uncertain moments and really give you the future to have the ability to focus and spend the energy where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Right. But people need to practice some of this.
Yeah. Totally agree. Our brains just do not like that uncertainty and will do whatever, take the, you know, path of least resistance to get us back to some certainty,
Yep.
right? And even if it's, bad habits, we'll quickly go, back there. And so focusing on what's in your sphere of control, right, is can help reduce that uncertainty,
Mhm.
I think. And, I know you shared that story about, living, in a camper on BLM land. And while you were saying that, I was thinking about, my walk on the Camino de Santiago and how I used it try as a transformative experience because, my life until that point had been all about, certainty. And as a leader of an organization, my role was really to try to reduce uncertainty, for everyone. But when I went on the Camino, I made a point of keeping some uncertainty in the equation, right? Not knowing where I was going to stop on any given day, right? Just basically taking it as my body allowed. But the way I bought down uncertainty was just to focus on the basics, right? I could focus on, food. I could focus on hydration. I could focus on connecting with the other folks that were out there on the Camino. And so I didn't really get, you know, rattled by the fact that I didn't know exactly where I was going to, lay my head that night, right? I just concentrated on what was in front of me and what was in my sphere of control right then.
Mhm. That's amazing. I love that story. And it makes me think too that like that's actually what these people can do when they are trying to get focused and energy too is go back to that time where you've done something like that. Even if it's
Mm,
when you were 10, 11, 12, like the first time you rode a bike. Like was anybody certain they were going to not fall? No, right? I wasn't. But we did it
right.
anyway. The first time I swam without a life jacket, right? That's a memorable moment too. And it's interesting, like, right, these are the things. That's what I was saying. Like, this really shapes you. Like, you already know everything's already there. The framework's in place at such a young age.
Yeah.
So when we're talking to, I mean, because you're gonna have a conversation for what age are these people that are gonna be watching you talk about focus and energy.
Yeah, I would say that they will probably be in, the middle of the pack, if you will, from like the third floor to, the sixth or seventh floor
Okay.
of life. And so one thing that I'm really thinking about ahead of this conversation is this idea of energy flowing.
Hmm.
And I know that there's folks, you know, out there that talk about, hey, how do we um, do the things that we need to do when our energy state is right? And when do we do the hard things when we've got the best energy? And then when do we push off the things that maybe are less important or easier to do to where we're in a lower energy state?
Hmm.
Um, what's your take on energy states?
I mean, right away, I'm just thinking about atoms and I'm thinking about all of like the different levels of energy states in a molecule and in an atom. Honestly, is where my head is going. And I want to think about it from that way because that's where my head always goes to a very scientific point. Because energy is right. It's like so. I guess a lot of it is, but it's not. It's not as black and white, right? Like even how much energy you have and how to. I mean, to get energy, right? You need to sleep, eat, drink water, exercise, blah blah blah. So it's like a part of me is thinking more about like how you harness your energy and try and leverage. Like I think that's what you're talking about. Is really leveraging
Mhm.
when it's low and when it's high.
Yeah,
And I know we've talked too, like in our coaching group community, we talk about energy audits. And I think
yeah,
I mentioned that let's take something I just wouldn't like, I don't think my I don't think the people I work with or myself would take the time to fill out an audit. I'm curious, actually, if anybody is watching live or watching the video and you want to put in the comments below, like, how do you feel about energy audits and taking the time to assess your energy level? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something to it, right? And this idea of manage your energy and not your task list.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, I've noticed in myself that there are times in the day where I'm more productive, or feel more, more productive. Have I ever sat down at this point and, put that on an audit form and tried to determine exactly which times of day, that is? I haven't,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest. But I think there is something to the idea of trying to harness, that internal energy and that internal drive, that we might have.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe you have more energy after you get away from your work center and go out for a walk, for 15 minutes and reconnect with yourself, come back to your work, center. And I've always found this, to be true, is if I can get a 15-minute break in, then especially if I'm able to walk, that I'll come back and I'll feel like, okay, I can go for another, you
Mm-hmm.
know, 25 or, 30 minutes on something that needs to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know. Still on the fence about energy audits.
Yeah. I mean, well, also though, just in general, like what you're saying too about like, hey, I know that if I do X, I will have more energy. I know that I'm most productive in the morning, right? I know like 8 to noon is my sweet spot for producing high quality work, and also
Yeah.
staying focused and not being distracted yet by all the other emails and things coming in.
Yeah.
But you said, so like, then it's also like, how do you actually focus enough to know how to harness your energy, right? Like I know this, I know that, but how do you even, because if they're two are tied, like how do we get enough focus to be able to how do you even focus on what and when and how your energy flows throughout the day?
Hmm. Well, I mean, you have to be deliberate about it. I think
Mhm.
is the way it goes, right? And so, if you think about trying to set yourself up for success, even the day before, right, where you can say, here are the important things the three most important things that in your decision filter that you said that I need to do today that are going to help me achieve my my stated goals.
Mhm.
And if you know what those are the night before, and then you could actually place them on the calendar in a time, right, where you know that it's going to be beneficial to having the most productivity, or the best, kind of outcome, then I think you're well on your way to, setting yourself up for success. And then you can be
Mhm.
like, okay, this one thing that is going to move the ball furthest down the field, I'm going to do at 9 o'clock because I'm in my, high energy
Mhm.
time. Does that
Mhm.
make sense? I tend to go back to the word deliberate a lot, and just being deliberate in how you set yourself up for success.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it all comes down to that. Like I do a ton of different practices to be deliberate about. Like even today, I was like, okay, I have until this time until I already know my head's going to go into this space. So what can I get done right in this my high focus time right now and the time that I'm most productive. And I'm was very deliberate about how I spent my time this morning, right
Yeah.
before we met. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So when you're going to talk to people about this, what are going to be some of the core like concepts you're going to make sure that you touch on here for
Yeah.
so it's is
So
it was it energy grows sorry no energy flows focus
where focus goes,
focus goes energy flows.
energy flows or grows,
Hmm.
depending on how positive you want to be. And I think I'm just going to go back to the basics and where we started kind of the conversation today, which is that self awareness
Hmm.
and what are my values, purpose, what's my why,
Hmm.
and helping. folks remember that that's where it starts. Right? Your energy is going to flow because you're going to be focused on the important things in life. So we're going to talk about that. We'll probably talk about, a couple of, productivity kind of hacks, if you will, to, to set yourself up for success. And I would put, your decision matrix as one of those productivity hacks that you
Mm-hmm.
can run things through to say, is this important or is this not important? Eisenhower matrix is another one of
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
types of things. And then, what can you do during the day, right? How can you get away and work in your high energy times? How can you take breaks? You know, things like the Pomodoro technique, where you go for 25 minutes. Set that timer, then take a break, so that you can really have that focused effort. That'll be some of the things that that we talk about, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that in the end, if you're deliberate about connecting those two, right, connecting that focus and those priorities to your energy, that
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna you're gonna be successful
Mm-hmm.
because you're gonna have been deliberate.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One other thing I wanted to make sure we touched on too is the concept of adaptability, because again,
Mm,
for those, I don't know if so you were in your the jet fighter pilot, which I always find very interesting, and I don't know where I would have met someone like you had I not joined the CEC. So I'm really grateful
yeah.
for that. And
And just to be fair, a lot of people, want to, talk about jet, fighter pilots, but I actually flew special operations, aircraft, which was a larger transport type aircraft that had a crew, right? Which brought entirely different leadership challenges to it when you have a crew of 9, 10, sometimes 11 that are, going in, behind the lines to try to insert special operations forces. But I wanted to correct the record there, so
sure.
you know, make
Yeah.
sure that folks understood where I was coming from as a former Air Force pilot.
Right. Air Force pilot. That's how I should probably reference it. So we talked to you before about like, as far as the focus goes, having adaptability and having being able to be agile, adaptable, and resilient.
Hmm.
Because I think even maybe the focus can even break if you're not giving yourself that ability to bounce back when you're not doing what you intended to do, right? Or when
Yeah.
things have gone completely out of what we expected it to be, and we don't know what's coming next, and change is happening rapidly.
Yeah, and that word resilience it's a big deal, and we talked about that a lot in that former line of work in the Air Force, because challenges come to you, and sometimes they're big challenges. And so I, I think one thing that I learned, though, is instead of looking about at resilience of like bouncing back, it's how do you move through? How do you move through that challenge so that you're adaptable in the moment, but you learn on the other end
Hmm.
of it. And that was important, whether I was flying an aircraft or whether I was leading an organization, of a couple thousand people, is how do you face that challenge? And then, what do you learn from it? And certainly it starts at the individual level, right? What are the things that, allow me to be resilient? And you used, the word adaptability or agility. I love that. In fact, I think there's a post out there today about adaptability out there on LinkedIn from one of our other favorite coaches, and um, looking forward to commenting on that, because it's so important.
Hmm.
Your ability, to have that mindset that, hey, I may have to pivot here, and
Hmm.
in pivoting, I'm going to learn something in the process.
Hmm. For sure. And, I think, I've been writing a book, and I talk about adaptability. There's a whole chapter on that. And I'm like, it's not waiting for a change to happen to you. It's stepping into it willingly and figuring out as you go. Right. It's like, that's what adaptability is. Once something's already happening, now we have to pivot. We have to be agile and like adapt. But really we should be out there actively challenging ourselves and our own beliefs to be more adaptable, resilient, and at the end of the day, more satisfied with our lives, right?
No, absolutely. And the one thing we know, and I love the quote from Mike Tyson, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah,
Is we've got all these other things that are operating around us, right? Used to call it the operating environment that's changing, constantly. And so if you're not on the lookout for how you need to be changing or adapting, the environment will act on you, right? And you will, not grow. You won't stay static. You will actually, digress, right? You will dilapidate. If that's even a word that I can subscribe to there, but that operating environment is just changing. So you've got to be able to adapt, and that's kind of an everyday type thing.
for sure. And that really just like reinforces what I said about you're the one who has to step out and do it. So otherwise, like you said, it can really take you down. Then you end up with these same old stories, and everything is the same. It's always been this way, right? I'm always going to
Mhm.
be this way. It's always, you see people who live in chronic stress or chronic, ideals, and you're just like, even if they don't know how to escape it,
Yeah.
it's because they're not putting themselves out there to challenge the environment that they're in.
Hmm.
It's interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that, and I think that's probably another conversation. We could dig in on that because it's so important for leaders, whether they're just emerging leaders or whether they're longtime leaders,
Hmm.
to reconnect with those ideas of resiliency and adaptability.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, I want to like at least give you another chance. Is there anything else we want to discuss? We said we'd go as long as we wanted, but we're at about half hour, and I know people's attention spans. I don't know how much focus they have today or how much energy they have right now, but maybe they might need a break and to go do something else.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about before we say goodbye to each other and to the few people who might be listening to us?
No, I think that what a great conversation today. And I just said no, and I meant yes. And
Okay.
from talking to me that I say that a lot.
Yeah.
I say no, and I mean yes. But
Yeah.
what a great conversation! I think that you've helped clarify my thinking on this idea of where focus goes, energy flows, and so I appreciate that. That's what I appreciate about our conversations is you've got just this wealth of knowledge, and you're really willing to bring it to the fore and challenge me.
Yeah.
So I
I
appreciate it.
feel I feel exactly the same. I always appreciate our conversations, and you give me another way to think about things. One of the things people don't know is that so like we always have these different debates in our coaching community, and even with Brad and I, we're like, I'm all in on assessment work and like right, clarity is critical, but like that's one of the things we debate about is how much do you assess somebody before they're assessed out there? They already know everything about themselves, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, but you always have like any of your values, the values assessments that you do are so robust and different than what I've seen before. And so I equally am inspired and always encouraged by our conversation. So thank you so much for saying yes to doing this with me, and allowing me and allowing us to have a conversation live where people might see.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. And it sounds like assessments is the next topic.
Oh yeah, that one could get heated. All right. Well, I'm just going to say goodbye to anybody who's watching, or if you're watching the recording, thank you so much for joining us. And, I really hope that you leave here with something that you learned or something to think about when you go home tonight or when you shut this down. But do remember that, stepping into uncertainty willingly and figuring out as you go. I think that's one of the greatest takeaways I took today is really challenging your environment at all times is really what's going to, I think, give you more focus and energy and have more control over what it is of what's happening to you than letting the environment control you. So thanks for saying that today.
Love it.
All right. Anything else you want to say?
No, great conversation. Let's do it again.
All right. Goodbye.